Hello everyone, my name is Akanksha Nani, and welcome to my YouTube channel Neuro Chat with AG. On this channel, I plan to cover topics that are closest to my heart and support the neurodiverse community. Topics related to neurodiversity, autism spectrum disorder, and more. On the channel, I will interview thought leaders, esteemed researchers, scientists, professors, doctors, and psychologists, seeking their views and updates on their latest work, research, etc. I will also chat with parents of neurodiverse kids and adults and talk about experiences of neurodiverse individuals. Dr. Daniel Wendler is a clinical psychologist, renowned author of 4 books, a 2-time TEDx speaker, a social skills coach, and an advocate for the autism community, known for his work on social skills and communication. Diagnosed with Asperger syndrome at a young age, Daniel faced numerous social challenges, which fueled his passion for understanding and mastering social skills. His personal experiences led him to create resources that help others navigate the complexities of social interactions, including his widely acclaimed book, Improve Your Social Skills. Through his writing, speaking engagements, and coaching, Daniel has become a beacon of support for those struggling with social anxiety, empowering them to connect more meaningfully with others. His work is characterized by a deep empathy for those who feel socially isolated, and his insights continue to inspire and guide individuals worldwide in their journey toward better communication and social integration. Dr. Wendler, welcome and thank you very much for the time today.
It's my pleasure to be here, and thanks for the great introduction. I'm blushing a little bit. It's very nice things to say about me.
I think you've done very great things, and I really would love to hear about your personal journey and what led you to become an advocate for social skills development and write all these amazing books.
Yeah. So I think in order to tell that story, we got to kind of go back to my childhood where, I was growing up in the 90s, and I sort of knew that I couldn't really connect with other kids, but I didn't know why. I would try my best to be social. I would try my best to be friendly, and I would be met with just sort of polite disinterest at best, and outright rejection and bullying at worst. And as time went by, I started to internalize that as maybe being that it was my fault, that there was just something bad about me, that there was something broken, that I was too weird, too nerdy, whatever it was. For some reason, I just wasn't cut out for people to like me. But then just before I started high school, my parents took me to a psychologist who diagnosed me with Asperger's, which would be just, autism today. So I like to tell people that I'm vintage because you can't get an Asperger's diagnosis anymore. They removed it from the DSM. But the psychologist diagnosed me with this, and they explained that these struggles that I was having to connect socially, it wasn't because I was bad in some way. It was just because there was this set of skills that other people sort of picked up naturally that I never knew. Things like body language, things like reading tones of voice, things like looking at social subtext and social cues. And when I learned that, I realized, I could work on this. Just like I could, learn, I was studying Spanish at the time in high school. Just as I could learn how to conjugate a Spanish verb, there was rules behind that. I could learn how to read somebody's body language. There were probably rules behind that also. So I started on this process of teaching myself social skills like a foreign language, and it started to pay off. I started to be able to build strong relationships, connect with other people, really experience the joy of having a social life. And then some years later, after I graduated college, I realized, these things that have helped me, I really think that they could help other people. And so that's what led me to sit down and start to write the website improveyoursocialskills.com, which ultimately turned into the Improve Your Social Skills book. And that really took off. I started to have readers all around the world reach out to me, hire me for coaching. But I wanted to not just rest on my laurels. I wanted to be able to give the greatest amount of impact, which is why I then went to grad school to become a psychologist, so I could sort of do that kind of work full time. But then as I had been doing the social skills work, what I realized is that it wasn't enough to just provide social skills training and encourage autistic and neurodivergent people to kind of work on their own to achieve acceptance and connection, but that everybody else in the world had some work to do also. And as I sort of discovered this idea of neurodiversity, I saw that that created this really amazing pathway to sort of say, hey, what if instead of, the next generation of little Daniels, what if instead of forcing them to say, hey, you have to learn how to make eye contact the way that people expect, what if we could teach everybody else to say, hey, why can't you communicate with your autistic friend without forcing them to communicate eye contact, to do it in a different way that's still valid? Or instead of forcing autistic people to just tough it out and endure sensory environments that aren't good for them, what if we change our environment so that it's not so hostile to autistic people? They don't have as much need to have a meltdown because the environment isn't as stressful. And so the work that I do now as an author, as a speaker, as a clinician, is a combination of both, encouraging people to build up their own social and relational skills, but also kind of, inspiring our society and our world to engage in allyship and create environments that are more inclusive for everybody, including neurodivergent people.
Awesome. Thank you. Your journey is very inspiring, and thank you for sharing it. And I also wanted to ask about how your own experiences with autism influenced your decision to write about social skills.
Yeah, I think it really was experiencing both the blessing and the curse that comes from being a human being and wanting to connect with other human beings. Like I've experienced just deep loneliness and deep sadness that came from that. And I've experienced like just really incredible memories of being among people that really love me, who I can laugh with, who can support me. Like I've experienced both of those things. And that really helped me understand that like this is so important, because I think that some people who maybe have always had friends around them, they kind of take it for granted. Or people who have never had friends, maybe they don't know what they're missing. But the fact that my autistic journey started in this place of isolation and led me to this place of community really inspired me to say, hey, I want as many people as possible to make that same journey, because being able to find that place of connection and have a relationship or have a life where you have strong relationships. It's kind of like that old Wizard of Oz movie where Dorothy moves from Kansas, where everything's black and white, and then she moves to Oz, where everything's in color. It's the same kind of thing of it just adds a whole new dimension to life, to have lots of wonderful relationships. And it's sort of like if me as a person with autism was able to achieve that, then everybody's going to be able to achieve that and find people that they can connect with.
Yeah, I really like that Wizard of Oz example you gave. What were some of the most challenging social situations you faced growing up, and how did you overcome them? I specifically love the way your family established the term jumping around. So please tell us a bit about that too.
Yeah. So I guess I'll sort of answer both of those things. So I think that for me, one of the biggest struggles that I had growing up was that I went to a public elementary school where it just felt like a war zone, and every other student was in the opposite army. I actually have a memory of getting like a little thumbtack, like you would use to put things on a board, and carrying that in my pocket so I would have a weapon to defend myself. And it's not that I wanted to hurt anybody; it's that I felt so afraid, like anybody there could try to victimize me at any moment. And that was just an overwhelming environment for me. And I think that some of the things that really helped me is, number one, I think that my parents and my sister provided this home environment that was always sort of this bastion of love and care. And so even no matter how bad things got at home, or sorry, how bad things got at school, I could always go home and have a safe place to recharge. I think that they also worked to get me into a better environment. So for middle school, I went to a private middle school, and that was a sacrifice for my family. It was an expensive school, but they were able to get the resources together, and having it be a smaller school with teachers that were a little bit more engaged, that really allowed me to start to flourish and feel better. I think to answer that question about the jumping around thing, when I was a kid, I would stim a lot, like many autistic people. So I would move my body in sort of this rhythmic way. And one of the ways that I really like to stim is we had a basement in our house, and I would go into the basement and I would sort of just like jump around as I would be imagining these adventures of being a Jedi Knight or something like that. And I would be sort of, waving my arms in a rhythmic way. I would be making, sort of rhythmic noises. I was just like, the way that I was moving my body helped me really immerse myself in this imagined world that I was creating. And it was a weird kind of thing. But instead of judging it or stigmatizing it, my parents just called it jumping around. And so it was like, oh, Daniel's, jumping around, or, I could say, oh, I'm going to go in the basement and go jump around a little bit. And they're like, okay, that's fine. So it just became kind of a typical part of how we lived our lives. And I think as I got older, I started to develop more shame around my stimming and that part of myself. But when I was younger, my home was a safe place where I could express that.
Regarding law enforcement and encounters with neurodivergent individuals, what issues do you see and how do you think they can be better handled?
Yeah, I think it's a tough situation. And this is something that I've done some training and consulting on. One of my one of my friends from grad school, who was also trained to be a psychologist, had worked as a police officer in the past, and so he would tell me some stories about dangerous situations that he'd been in, and sort of the risks that officers take, that require them to be able to defend themselves. But also, we hear all these stories in the news about an autistic person who's completely harmless, who maybe gets treated roughly by police, or maybe even gets killed by police, because the police don't understand how to interpret the behaviors. And I think that I certainly don't think that it's the sort of thing where you should listen to me talk for 3 minutes in an interview and have that be the policy of your department. But I think that this is a thing where law enforcement across the country really needs to get solid training on how to address this better in a way that is compassionate, that sees autistic people not as troublemakers, but as people that are trying to do the right thing, but maybe don't have all of the understanding of the resources. Like when I do trainings for this on law enforcement, I talk about the idea of looking for the unmet need, and often the unmet need is for calm or it's for clarity. Like either the autistic person who might be behaving in an erratic way that's drawing the attention of law enforcement. If that person's having a meltdown, then a law enforcement person coming and yelling at them, that's just going to make them more upset. That's going to make them behave more erratic, versus a law enforcement person that speaks in a calm voice, that keeps their distance, that maybe offers them a snack or something like that, that can help create calm. Or again, clarity. Sometimes people might not understand that what they're doing is wrong or dangerous or against the law, and instead of assuming that, oh, this person is a criminal because they're doing this thing that's not allowed, sort of saying, hey, maybe this person just doesn't understand, and I can try to work with them to help them understand. I think that for police departments that have trainings around this, that are able to recognize, oh, this person might be neurodivergent, and so I'm going to respond to them in a little bit of a different way, that can sometimes lead to significantly better outcomes. So it's not a requirement of having to figure it out for the first time. There's proven principles that departments can use. They just have to put the effort into training their officers and making that part of their values and culture.
Thank you. That's very important. And what inspired you to write your books, particularly Improve Your Social Skills and Neurodiversity and the Myth of Normal?
Yeah, I think the story behind those books was really kind of a different story. Like the Improve Your Social Skills book, it really was kind of just this leap of faith of like, here's these things that have been helpful for me personally. But I don't know if anybody else will care about this. I don't know if anybody else will read this, but I wanted to put it out there and see what would happen. And I still remember getting like the first person who bought the book. Like I see that, I'm like, oh my goodness, like somebody actually wants to read this. And now the book has sold a lot of copies, but I still, when I was writing it, I had no idea if anybody would find this helpful or interesting. And so it was just sort of, but I had this sense of these things were so transformative for me. These ideas were so helpful in my own life that I need to take a chance and put it out there, because maybe it's going to help somebody else. And then I think with neurodiversity and the Myth of Normal, that was a book that I co-authored with my best friend, Dr. Kyla Shumway, who's also a brilliant psychologist. And I think for that, it was really an opportunity to I think try to shape the conversation, that there were some other authors, speakers, et cetera, that were putting out some great content around neurodiversity, but it was rare to find something that just explained it in a cohesive package that then had a lot of practical applications. And so I think that we saw an opportunity from our perspective as clinicians to say, hey, let's take this concept, let's explain it, but then let's talk about how this can really play out in people's individual lives. And so the format, it was technically commissioned by the Great Courses. The format of it as a lecture series, I think gave us a really great opportunity to say, this is something that we can really teach, not to replace all of the other authors who have also put out awesome stuff on neurodiversity, but to maybe create one introductory point that's going to be really helpful for people who are wanting to gain access to this transformative idea.
And the book you co-authored, Neurodiversity and the Myth of Normal, it suggests that our education systems often fail neurodivergent students by trying to fit them into a one-size-fits-all model. So what changes do you believe are necessary in education to better serve them?
I mean, that's an entire book in and of itself. And I'm sure that, there's, my mom was an educator. I think, many of the people that are working in education are just putting in heroic efforts and are contributing a huge amount to the kiddos in their care. And I think that a lot of people that work in education would acknowledge that our systems don't do a great job of meeting the needs for any students. So I don't want to claim that this is an easy problem to solve or that we have infinite resources for it. But I think for the folks that most need it, we definitely do want to do a better job of looking after them. And again, there's a lot of things that we could talk about. I think one of the biggest things that I would encourage is to say that if schools could make it a value to ensure that every student has at least one friend, I think that would really be transformative, because there's research that shows that having a single friend improves mental health, improves academic outcomes, even years later in adulthood, whether or not you had a friend in childhood, it, helps you be better off. And so it's not just a kumbaya, lovey-dovey kind of thing. It's going to have impact on the metrics that you're being evaluated for, but it's also the right thing to do, because having even just a single friend changes it from nobody likes me, nobody cares about me, to, oh, somebody likes me, somebody cares about me. That helps shape the student's identity away from I must be bad to like, well, I guess I'm not for everybody, but that's okay. And so I think engaging in some targeted kinds of programs that help make sure that if there's a student that doesn't seem to have any friends, maybe they're getting connected with, a club on campus where they can make some friends. Maybe there's other students that are a little bit kinder that can sit next to them. Maybe they can get, sent over to the counselor's office to learn some skills for going out and befriending other students, whatever it might be, making sure that your school has a value of, nobody goes through life alone. Everybody has at least one friend, and we're going to be creative to find programs that can make that happen. I think that would be really transformative, not just for the neurodivergent kids who might need it most, but for any kid who's, lonely, or might be coming from a new school, or might be having problems at home, or any number of other reasons why that student doesn't have any friends. If you can get them their one friend, that's going to make a big difference for them.
Thank you. Yeah, that seems like a really great idea, because I don't think it's something I've seen personally, but like just imagining not having anybody to talk to at all, I think it would make schools way harder than it already is.
Yeah. There's a technique that I've seen. It actually came from a blog called Momastery, but it's called the classroom X-ray. And it was this teacher that every week or whatever would say, hey, every student has to pick, 5 other students that they might want to sit next to. And then they submit that list. And she would use that to develop the seating chart. But the important thing wasn't the seating chart. It was, who is the student that's not on anybody's list? Who is the student that nobody else wants to sit by? And that student's in danger. That student might not have any friends. And so could I maybe sit them next to somebody that I think they would get along with, or next to a group that might include them, or something like that. So it doesn't take that much. But it can be really transformative to help somebody who's in that place of, man, I don't have anybody to talk to.
Could you discuss the process of developing your social skills guide and what you hope readers take away from it?
I think that the problem with a lot of the social skills guides that are out there is that they're designed kind of as a collection of tips and tricks. And so it's like, oh, like you should, when you walk into a room, every time you walk through a doorway, you should use that as a reminder to sit up straight so you have better posture, you appear more confident. It's like, all right, well, it's not a bad tip. It'll help you a little bit. But that's not actually teaching you the fundamentals of how do you connect with other people. It's kind of like having a guide to baseball that's like, oh, you should keep your eye on the ball. It's like, well, yeah, you should, but if I know to keep my eye on a ball, but I don't know when I'm supposed to swing the bat, or I don't know what direction I'm supposed to run around the bases, I can't play baseball because you've given me a tip and trick, but you haven't given me the actual rules of the game. And I think that with my social skills guide, I was like, I want to give people the rules of the game. I want to give people the fundamental principles of here's how you actually have a conversation. Here's how you actually understand body language. Here's how you make a friend, and really try to have that be actionable, not just assorted tips and tricks that don't actually give you the fundamentals.
And how has the landscape of social skills training changed over the years, especially with the rise of digital communication?
I think one thing that has been an improvement that I've seen is that there has been more of a rise of social skills communication that's just focused on actual connection and communication. I think when I first started writing, basically every other social skills guide out there was like a dating guide. And oftentimes they were sort of like skeezy pickup artist guides for dudes that are like, oh, if you do this, then girl's totally gonna fall for you. And you just gotta, fool her into thinking that you're a cool guy by doing these. And it's like, that stuff's garbage. And it's good that nowadays there's more content that's actually like, hey, here's how to actually engage in a way that's like ethical and effective. I do think though that there is a challenge in that, because just anybody can claim to be an expert, anybody can publish something. It's a lot more difficult nowadays to sort of weed through everything that's out there and find out what's actually useful and what's actually effective. And I mean, it's the same problem of, everything else, right? You go on TikTok, you want to look for information about a medical condition. For every doctor that knows what they're talking about, you're going to have 20 people that have, are just making up something because they want to get your, subscribers or whatever. But I think that if you're deliberate to look for content that really is useful and helpful, there is a lot more of it out there than there used to be.
And I know there's like a lot, and you could spend probably many hours talking about this, but what are some common misconceptions about autism and social skills?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're asking me a lot of questions that all of these could be a new book, right? Like we just end this interview and then I could go off for 10 years and just write books on all these things, but it's good. It's a lot of great questions. I think the biggest misconception that I commonly see around autism, well, I'd say it's maybe two things. I think one is that there's a misconception that people with autism, they lack empathy or they lack interest in social connection. And it's just not true, right? Like I think that people with autism care sometimes very deeply about the other people in their life, and people with autism want to connect with others and care about relationships. And, just like any group, you're going to have some people that care about that stuff more than other people. But overall, autistic people, I think, are a very warm and affectionate and relational group of people. It's just that we might not have the ability to necessarily understand what somebody is experiencing unless they tell us. And so it's not that we don't have empathy, it's that we just don't know that you're sad because you're doing a pretty good job of hiding it and you're not telling us that. But if you told us, then we would really care, then we would do our best to show compassion. I think that the other thing that I think can sometimes be a big misconception around autism is sort of this assumption around assuming malice instead of an innocent mistake, right? Like if an autistic person, sometimes I would run a situation where I would say something and it wouldn't come across in the way that I intended. And then people would get mad at me, and then I'd be like, oh, I didn't intend it that way. I intended this other way, but then they would still be mad at me. And that would be challenging because I'm like, I legitimately did not intend at all. I was not trying and so I think that to give some slack and some trust and some benefit of the doubt to autistic people, to be able to just clarify with them, hey, you said this, is this actually what you meant to say? Is this what you meant to communicate? That stuff I think can go a long way.
Yeah, I think I totally understand what you're talking about, because a lot of the people I work with have, like, communicated the same thing with me, that, like, oh, I didn't mean to say that. Like, if that came out rude, I'm just trying to, like, be blunt, but, like, it's not
Mm-hmm.
a rude blunt. It's just like, this is how I feel.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, like, I think one time some person said, like, I really dislike, to me, like, somebody said, I really dislike spending this time with you, like, when we were working on
Mm-hmm.
an activity. And, like, if I just taken that at face value and said, oh, so you don't want to spend time with me, and walked away. But, like, when I asked him, like, what do you mean by that, and then he explained that, like, oh, I don't really like doing this activity, and I'd rather be doing something else right now. So
Yeah.
yeah.
No, like there was a time that I remember when I was younger, and my mom is like, hey, do you want to help do the dishes? And I said no. um and she got very like upset, and she's like, oh, you're being very, very rude and very disrespectful. I was like, no, like you didn't tell me to do the dishes. If you had told me to do the dishes, I would have done the dishes. You asked me if I wanted to, and I just gave you an honest answer. Like, what's the problem here? And I, obviously, like, I think most neurotypical people, they would sort of understand that she wasn't just asking a question for information. She was telling me to do the dishes. It's just that in that moment, I didn't know that. And the reason we had that conflict is because, she wasn't able to realize that I wasn't trying to be bratty. I just literally didn't understand the intention. Like, I thought maybe I don't know, some people like doing the dishes. I don't know. Like, so yeah.
And what advice would you give to someone struggling with social anxiety or difficulty in social situations?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest encouragements that I would offer is that anxiety is one of the most treatable things in therapy. It's something that we, psychologists, therapists, counselors have a lot of experience in dealing with, and especially if you work with somebody who specializes in that, they're very likely to be able to get you really strong results. And so, if this is something that you struggle with, if this is something that holds you back, and it's not something that you worked on in therapy, I would encourage that as the first step. And if it is something that you have worked on in therapy and it didn't feel like you were getting good results, it might be worth trying again with a different therapist. Again, maybe somebody who specializes more specifically in anxiety. I would also say that if you're like, okay, well, that's great, Daniel, but give me something I can use now without going to therapy. I think that the two biggest suggestions that I would offer is to say that when you're afraid of something and it's hard for you to do, try to cut it in half and see if you're still too afraid of it to do it, right? So if you're like, oh, I'm really afraid to, there's a party, I'm really afraid to go to the party. It's like, all right, well, would you still be afraid to go to the party if you can leave after 1 hour? Because that's a lot less than staying at the whole party. Okay. Maybe you are still too afraid. Would you be too afraid to not go to a party with everybody, but spend time with one person? Would you be too afraid to just research information on the party on Facebook and post a message saying, sorry, I can't make it? Like, keep shrinking it down until you find something that you're like, yeah, I could do that. Because every time you do something when it's a little bit scary, it makes it easier for you to do something that's, more scary next time. The other thing that I would recommend is that whenever you have a fear, ask, so what? About the fear multiple times, because you want to be able to get to the core of what it is you're worried about. Like, okay, I'm going to go to a party and I'm afraid of that. Well, why are you afraid of that? Well, maybe I won't talk to anybody. All right, so what? Why is it bad to not talk to anybody? Well, maybe that means that, I will, feel sad and rejected. Okay, well, you'll feel sad and rejected. So what? What'll happen after that? Well, I guess probably after 10 minutes, I'll feel better and I'll go play a video game. All right, well, So the thing that you're really afraid of is feeling bad for 10 minutes and then playing a video game. How bad is that really? Is that really something that you need to avoid? And if you get to that final answer of this is what would actually happen, then it becomes a lot easier to confront the scary thing.
And looking back on your journey, is there any advice you'd give to your younger self?
Well, I'd probably tell my younger self to wear earplugs when I went to a concert. Not really what we're talking about now, but I went to one concert and I was up too close to speakers and I got a little bit of hearing loss, and that's never fun. So if you're young and you're listening to this, wear ear protection and don't listen to your headphones too loud. But thinking more in the context of autism or social relationships, I think that the big thing that I would encourage my younger self with is to say that you'll always find your people. And there's been chapters of my life where I felt isolated, where I felt disconnected, where maybe I move away from one group of friends and I haven't made my new group of friends yet, and I wonder, oh, am I ever going to find new friends? Oh, my, like, and throughout my life, every time that I've gone through one of those transition periods, I've always found my people. I've always found a group of friends who love me, support me, care for me, accept me just as I am, even though I'm weird. And so I think that my big advice is, even if you're in a period that feels kind of bleak, recognize that it is going to get better. You are going to find your people. You are going to get out of whatever bad period it currently feels like you're in.
And yeah, thank you. And is there anything else you would like to share with our viewers or listeners?
I think that I just let people know that if they go to danielwendler.com, that's my website, they can see my Substack, some of the newest writing that I'm putting out. They can look at my books, my TED Talks, and they can see the kind of speaking that I do. And there's a contact form on that website. So if you have any questions, I don't have like a team of people that answer my mail for me or whatever. Like, if you send me an email, I'm going to get it. And if you ask me a question, or if there's some way I can be helpful, I'm going to do my best to respond to that. So definitely, if the stuff that you saw in this interview felt interesting, go to danielwendler.com and check out my writing, and maybe send me a note and say hi.
Yeah, this interview was just kind of a sneak peek of what all the things Dr. Wendler has written about. I mean, there's like a huge thank you so much for doing this. I'd like really enjoyed this conversation. And I learned a lot that like I didn't know before. So
yeah, great questions, and I appreciate you taking the interest.